Welcome back to another episode of Cozypreneur. This episode is for people with memberships, teams, anyone leading a training, whether it's for your internal team or for clients. You're going to want to give this one a listen. As someone who has taught in classrooms for 6 years, led professional development for hundreds of people, this episode is really what I see missing from the business space. So let's dive in. If you've been listening for a while, you know I'm very, very big on collaboration. So before we dive into this episode and what doesn't work and why people dread professional development and trainings and meetings and all of that fun stuff, I really do think that collaboration is the missing piece for a lot of these meetings. Because when you feel like you're a part of something, you're invested in it a lot more, and it's not going to feel like something that's happening to you. It feels like you're like an active agent of your own learning and your own outcomes. And so when I look back at my time teaching, like I look back at those moments where I got to collaborate with other teachers, and those really were like the most meaningful moments because we truly got to collaborate. We truly got to see like what was working, what wasn't working, where did we need additional support, how could we support each other. And it's the same thing that I love about collaborating in business, right? Like when you have a space that everyone's ideas are valued and you can get people together who are excited about the same ideas and willing to work together, like that is really, really special. But it's really tricky to actually create the conditions for that true collaboration to happen because people need to feel really safe and they need to feel like, okay, my ideas are valued, my ideas actually are important, and so I do want to contribute to this group, and people have to feel like it is worth their time. So how do you actually do that? We're going to get there, but I want to talk about what's not working. Anything that could have been an email should be an email. Anything that could have been an email where you are just on a call and you're just sitting there and you're like, I could have waited for the recording and watched this on 2x speed instead of actually being here with my time, especially if you're face on camera. That is one reason why people dread trainings and why you might not have willing participation in your trainings. Or you have things that are kind of on the other end of the spectrum where they're not information heavy, but they are fun, but you're not actually doing anything. Like they might be fun, but it's not really related to a goal, which sometimes it's important to do that and to just like let loose and have fun. But it's important to find the right balance there. Because if I'm going to a business event, yes, I want it to be fun and engaging, but I also want to be either learning something new, collaborating with people, building my network. There's a purpose behind why I want to show up to a business event, and I want that purpose to be really clear. Side note, that's where you want to have your value communicated really clear through your message and your copy, because if you're hosting an event for clients, you need to know what those outcomes are, and those need to be very clearly stated in your copy. But anyway, back to facilitation and retreats. Great retreats, great trainings, they work because people are invested. They feel like they're part of it. They're not feeling like they're being talked at. Even when you go to webinars that have hundreds of people, you can see the facilitators using strategies like put a 1 in the chat, right? Like that is meant to engage your audience so people are paying attention. I learned with, having 2 education degrees, it's not so much about teaching content, right? Like you can teach the content, and especially like in this day and age with AI and so much stuff you can just Google or search YouTube. It's not really about the content, right? It is about getting people to think, because at this point, people can learn how to do anything online, right? And that's not really what they're paying for. It's not really the content. It's about how are they engaging with the content. And if you want to get like super philosophical, you can think back to like Socrates, right? Like his philosophy is like, you're not teaching people, you are helping them think. And it's this idea of people already have the knowledge inside of them, which yes and no. But it's really about finding this balance, right? You're keeping people focused on a goal, but you're also hearing their ideas and trying to get them to figure out the conclusion or solve a problem or whatever your outcome is on their own, right? Like that's the piece where they are invested inside the training. And so it's a really hard thing to do, I will say. Like it comes from years of practice. It's really tricky to find because it's one of those things where sometimes you're in a room with people and you're like, hey, I know what the outcome is. These are the steps we're going to take to get to this outcome. And then people come in and you have to scrap your plan or adjust your plan in the moment because life happens. This actually happened to me recently. I was facilitating a retreat and I had planned 2 activities for the morning, but people got there late, and when we were doing the first activity, a lot of things came up in conversation that I actually just in that moment was like, you know what, we don't actually need this second activity that I had planned. I'm just going to scrap it because we are at a place where we are ready to jump from like the thinking part to the action part, and that was a decision I had to make in the moment. And so things like that are tricky and they come with practice, but it's also like if you are facilitating a retreat or a training, like just being flexible with your plan is really important, because when you're too rigid with your plan, you're going to lose people because you're not actually responding to what's happening in front of you. And that's something that I bring to Copy Classroom. Like Copy Classroom has had so many iterations because I am learning and listening from the people inside the group and seeing like what's working, what's not working, and where are people really engaged and leaning into that even more. And when I think about my approach to Copy Classroom, it's like I'm not coming in and being like, I have all of the answers, right? I am providing them with the information. I am asking the right questions. For some people who have been in there for a while, I know who their ideal clients are. I know what their messaging is. But when people first come in, like, I don't know the answers to these things. And part of my role as the facilitator of that group is asking the right questions so people can think and reflect and come up with their own solutions, and then giving feedback on that and seeing their growth over time. Like that's what's really cool about the space. And so when I think about Copy Classroom, it's like, yes, you're learning to write copy, you're learning to get the right messaging across, but I'm not just sitting there and being like, this is what you have to do. Like, no, that's wrong. This is what you have to do. It's like, no, let's get curious together. And I'm going to use my expertise to really push you in the right direction. So I think when you're thinking about trainings and facilitation, the biggest mistake I see people making is either under planning, like not having a plan. I am always team over plan and then scrap what you don't need. You can always use that later. Or they over plan, but they're not doing it purposefully. Like they're not really thinking about what is the goal behind each of these activities. Like why are we even showing up and bringing these people together? When that's not clear, it's going to be hard to get that engagement and that shared sense making and shared purpose. So when you're thinking about your retreat or whatever, like it's not just about creating slides. If you can put everything that you want to say, all of your outcomes inside slides, no questions, no conversations, then just send it in an email. It does not have to be a live in person or even on Zoom thing. Another thing to consider, and this is something that I learned when I'm teaching, is when you're in a live meeting, you don't want it to go between you and then a participant and then you and then a participant and then you, and zigzagging between you as a facilitator and a speaker. If you're imagining like a ball of yarn and you are throwing it to whoever's speaking inside of a training and it is going back and forth between you and people, like that's not the goal. Your goal is for you to throw that ball of string to somebody, for them to throw it to somebody else, for them to throw it to somebody else, and to really create this like conversation between a lot of people. And then your job as the facilitator is to make sure like that ball of string is really being spread to a lot of people and not just one voice is dominating the conversation. And so that's really the key to getting the people in the room to build relationships with each other, to have conversations. And that's something to consider when you're planning. Like, how do you spark those conversations between people? And for me personally, I've done a lot of group programs, and that's probably one of the biggest pieces that are missing, where like you are just interacting with the consultant or the coach in the room, and you are not really building those relationships with other people. So jumping backwards, we talked a little bit about what happens during meetings, but jumping backwards into planning. As a former teacher, as an educator, I am always starting with my outcomes and takeaways. I know I talked about this a little bit earlier in the episode. You're starting with the outcome, you're backwards planning, and it's not just teaching what you did from your experience, right? It's understanding who is in the room and how to adapt what you're doing to the people in front of you. What I did for my business is working for me, but it might not work for other people. And so sometimes I will make a recommendation to somebody. I'm like, hey, have you tried this? And they're like, oh, I hate that. And I said, okay, great. Let's think about a different way to approach it, because not everybody is the same. And so that is part of your role as a facilitator, is really adapting to the people in front of you. And it's also understanding, like, when do people need to step back, right? Like, when are they stuck and they need to zoom out? They need to slow down to speed up. And when are they just avoiding the task and they need a push forward of like, hey, this is the next step. Like, I need some accountability to get XYZ done. So for me, I really love having small calls with like 3 or 4 people. I love like creating very safe learning environments where people love getting off mute and sharing with each other. I love knowing every single person on the call and connecting with them. And I would rather have 2 people on a call and have a really great conversation than have 20 people and it's just me going through slides and it's awkward because I feel like I'm talking to myself. That is not the vibe that I go for, because I know that having that active participation is going to move the needle for people so much more than just sitting and listening and thinking that this would have been faster if I watched the recording on 2x speed. And not to say, like, you know, of course, there are people who have to be camera off or can't participate fully, and that's totally okay. But I want people to feel safe in being able to participate if and when they want to. Thinking about that, making sure when somebody walks into the room, it's the beginning of a training, you know your outcomes. If you know the people in the room, you're taking that into consideration, how they best work, what you know about where they're coming from. You want to move through a retreat or a meeting in a way that feels paced, right? Like, you're not trying to get through everything on your schedule. You want it to be moving along and staying focused, but you don't want to be rushing through. Like, you need to make space so people feel heard. And something that you can do, like, through the process is really checking in with people, you know, saying, hey, this is a whole day retreat, like, hey, are people feeling hungry? Like, do we need to pause for a snack? Do we need a bathroom break? Like, I will schedule things down to like the 5 minutes, and then I will get there and I will change things based on what's going on in the group. And that's okay. That's what a really great facilitation actually is. It's really listening to your people. And so when you're thinking about how can you listen to your people, where is there space in your retreat or in your meetings to get more of their ideas, to listen to more of their ideas? Where is it okay for people to feel a little confused and a little frustrated? Like, sometimes that's a normal part of learning. That's a normal part of decision making. Like, things are not going to be easy all of the time. And so your job as the facilitator is to create space for those feelings, getting people to pause and think, and then moving them along, right? For me, I think about teaching and facilitation, they are very similar, right? except that teaching is more focused on the goal of acquiring a skill or acquiring content, versus facilitation can be more about decision making or sense making or a shared outcome. So maybe it's like, hey, we need a new onboarding process. How are we going to make that onboarding process a reality? And then you facilitate that process. So when I'm thinking about teaching and facilitation, it's not the slides that you make, it's not the emails that you send before and after, though those are important too. That's the copywriter in me speaking. But it's really about your human-to-human interaction. How are you supporting these people? So I talked about a lot of things in terms of facilitation and learning, and I could talk about so many more, but if you were going to change one thing about the way you facilitate group spaces, I would say start with the outcomes, right? Starting with what are the goals, and then once you know what the goals are, plan your activity, and you can think about what are some different ways to make this activity really engaging, create space for people to share their ideas, to actually hold space for their growth, right? That's really what facilitation is doing. That is my one piece of advice if you are planning something for a group of people, starting with the outcomes and then planning from there and making sure the outcomes are something that people actually care about. That's how you're going to get good input, because people will really see you're coming at this with intention, right? You're backwards planning, you're thinking about the outcomes first, you're making a plan, and you're not just jumping into things and being like, hey, okay, we're doing this, right? Like, you have been thoughtful about it, and that's gonna go leaps and bounds when it comes to facilitating a group. So if you want to see my facilitation in action, join my email list. The link is in the show notes. You can also go to stacybragacopy.com, and that email list is where I share invites to my monthly clarity calls and other spaces where we slow things down and think together and work through real business decisions. So to get your invite to the next clarity call, make sure you are on the email list. And thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, share with your business friends, and leave a review if you found this helpful. Thank you so much, and until next time.